So I was overlanding across the world in the beautiful country of Italy, and I came across this amazing cycle packer, cycle touring man, Australian man, and we met initially and talked about the hammock. Then he went on his way, and I don't usually go after the interviews. I let them come to me. I passed by him later down the road. He was just cruising, and I had to stop. He was looking at a hiking trail or something, and as it tends to happen, I just was so inclined to ask him one of my questions for my pack of cards. And so here's the conversation with him. We'll call this episode 1 of Challenger Chats across the world with beautiful people, because every human has a story. They deserve to be heard. Be more curious and less judgmental.
I'd like to start by asking, what's your name and where are you from? My name's Andrew, and I'm from Australia. What would you say is one thing that people don't really understand about Australia? I think the biggest thing people don't understand about Australia is that it's not actually an incredibly dangerous place full of incredibly dangerous wildlife that's going to kill you at every corner.
It doesn't actually happen that often?
Very rarely. Like, if you look at like a typical like dangerous poisonous snake or spider, and look at how often someone has to die from it, the last time you're going to find out, oh yeah, 10 years ago, some 80-year-old man got bitten and they couldn't get to the hospital in time, and so they died. It's that kind of scale of death. It's not every year a few people die. It's very, very rare.
And you're out here in Italy right now doing a bike packing trip, and you do them all over the world. I wanted to ask you, when you're on these trips and like hiccups or obstacles occur, like things maybe don't go your way, how do you mentally deal with it? Does it ruin your trip? Are you good at adapting? What happens?
Oh, no. My emotions are like up and down even throughout a single day. Like, I could wake up and it's cold and miserable and there's no views and I'm just like in the dumps. And then I'll go around the corner and see some incredible view, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, it was all worth it. Like thank God there's one thing to keep me going. And suddenly I'm more than happy. I'm like getting the camera out and taking photos, and I'm as happy as I could be. So, in terms of dealing with it, luckily I've never been pushed to the point where I found out what happens if it's just like completely dead. It can get pretty depressing and a little bit lonely, which is why sometimes when I see strangers with hammocks on the back of their cars, I stop and then kind of set up a conversation, because I've never spoken with anyone for ages. But for the most part, I keep in touch with people. I make contacts. And the biggest thing is I keep going. Like, I always have the ability to just hop on my bike and just be somewhere else.
We were talking about your emotions throughout the day and how you move past
Yeah.
them. Would you be able to restate what you were talking about on whether you embrace the roller coaster of the day, or how you get...
I definitely do embrace it, although at the same time, when I'm at my lows, I'm definitely, I start questioning, why am I here? And I start thinking about, all the mundane doldrums of life that I've kind of given up temporarily, that suddenly, that feeling of coming home from work and having a nice warm shower for as long as you want, and then just watching from YouTube, eating a snack, just all the stuff that we take for granted in our normal lives. All of a sudden, it just feels so enticing. Like I've never quite gotten to the point. It's like, I could get a flight right now. I could find the nearest airport and just book a flight home, and then I'd have to deal with whatever horrible thing I'm dealing with on the bike.
And then what stops you then from making that impulse decision?
Somehow, well, partly because I'm actually trapped out here. I mean, I'm on a bike, so my ability to actually enact any drastic measures are kind of limited.
That's probably a good thing, because then it stops you from making any rash decisions.
Yeah, 100%. But also, I found that my actual limits are quite high. I mean, on this trip, I guess the worst I've had it is completely miserable, drenched, freezing cold. My sleeping bag was wet, my tent was wet, and I basically had to pitch my tent. I cut my finger really badly and I was bleeding everywhere. So I was in the rain, freezing cold, trying to bandage my finger up, which is really hard because it was very like everything was just damp. Because I didn't want to pitch the tent with blood getting everywhere on all my stuff. Spent ages finding a pitch. Finally got it all together. Crawled inside. Had to strip down, try to dry myself, crawl into a wet sleeping bag, and then basically just shivered for a couple of hours until I fell asleep. So I figure it will have to be a bit worse than that for me to actually hit the point where I'm like, I don't care how much it costs, I'm going to find the nearest hotel that has a free room and I'm just taking it. So I don't know what that limit will be. I guess.
Do you appreciate nights like that when you look back? Like, oh, I dealt with this and continued on?
100%, yeah. I definitely do. And I've had like injuries before, like bad ones. In Iceland, a few days into my trip there, I completely destroyed my left knee. It was unusable. I couldn't walk on it, and it was the start of a trip, and I was about 80 kilometers from civilization, so it took me a few days to get a lift back, and that was pretty depressing because I couldn't, for a week and a half, I was basically unable to move. So I look back on that, and now whenever I have any kind of niggling injury, I'm like, it could be, remember that time when you literally had to get off the bike for, a week and a half and just sit there staring at the ocean.
Yeah. So it's not good that injury obviously happened because it really affected your Iceland trip, but it kind of provides you a reference point to appreciate things that aren't as bad.
Exactly, yeah. It's always trying to kind of manage everything, and my worst, I had a really depressing day here it was in Austria. I was crossing from Innsbruck over. I remember I had this video call with my partner, and I was telling her, like I've had kind of a bunch of bad days, mostly because my knee wasn't feeling very good, and I was kind of worried because I'd done some hikes, and it hurt when I did the hikes, it hurt when I cycled, and I thought, well, I feel kind of trapped by these injuries. I don't want to push myself, and I'm going to be doing much harder stuff very, very soon. And that day, I did more climbing on the bike than I've ever done in my life. So that day I did 2 mountain passes, like one over the border into Austria, and then in the afternoon I casually did like another like 1,500 meters up in a pass, upper pass in Italy, and I felt amazing. And after that I just felt like, oh shit, like I can do it. Like maybe the knee isn't as bad as I thought it was, and that just kind of pushed me to feel comfortable to, keep going.
It's like you said, just keep moving.
Yeah, 100%.
Okay. Well, the question you chose from my list was, who is a stranger that you still remember?
Yes. I've already, okay, so this is one person that immediately came to mind. My first big trip was Iceland, the Faroe Islands, Scandinavia in general, and I was in Norway. I was actually on the peak of the highest mountain road in Norway. It's I can't remember the name. It's just like the Snøveggen, and it was my first big climb of my life. It was 1,400 meters from sea level, because it's from the fjord. So you're starting from as low as you can go, and I'd finally made it. It had taken all day. I had much more gear than this. It was a much heavier bike. I was an idiot. I brought 2 camera bodies, 100 to 400 millimeter telephoto. I'd like 10 kilos more than this. I was an idiot. I'd finally made it, and I was just enjoying the view. Like a thunderstorm was slowly rolling in down the valley below me, and suddenly this gentleman shows up. This kind of grizzled Norwegian, and we start chatting. He hands me a beer. And we're just kind of chatting, and then we kind of trail off, and we're looking down this winding mountain road going up, because we see a guy, there's a car, and there's a man next to the car, and he's kind of jogging slowly and looking around. And we're just kind of looking at him and going, I wonder, what is he doing? What could he be possibly doing? And we kind of share this moment together, and for like 5 minutes, we see this guy jogging, sometimes slowing down a little bit, moving up the road, until he gets up to us, and we discover that he had been using a drone that was set to like hover around his car,
Yeah.
and it had run low on battery power and had just ran down into these rocks. And this is a craggy, this is a proper craggy mountain peak. It's not like these ones here. It's like it's just boulders and rocks and gravel. And this guy was certain that his drone had like safely landed, but just like and gotten stuck in some crevice somewhere. And so me and this guy who turned out to be a mountain ranger and guide, we spent like 20 minutes walking around, and finally we saw this little red light blinking, and we found the thing. And I don't know why, but just that 5 minutes of us trying to guess what this guy was doing, it was just so bizarre, just sticks out to me. It was one of my favorite moments in Norway.
What does it bring out of you in terms of emotions that makes you remember it so much?
Just that connection in such a unique way.
Okay.
I mean, I think we connect with people in a lot of obvious ways, like hobbies or interests, whatever else. But to connect with someone with like shared confusion.
Two more. Shared confusion.
Yeah, like to connect with someone with this kind of like moment of just like bizarre confusion and puzzlement was just so unique. It doesn't happen very often. It just, I don't know, for whatever reason, it just sticks with me.
Do you ever think about all of the factors that had to come into play for you to encounter him? Like whatever might have been going on in your day.
Oh, 100%. I mean, I often think about what circumstances lead me to any kind of interesting moments, or I'm not supposed to be here right now. So I'm here like 3 days ahead of schedule. I wouldn't have met you, 100%. Definitely wouldn't have happened. So I'll be thinking about our interaction. I'll be thinking about, whatever photos I've taken, whatever views I've seen, and thinking like, I wonder what the view would have been like if I'd gotten here early or later. You never know. I make weird spontaneous decisions sometimes on these trips because I've got a lot of time and I have everything I need, so I'm not beholden to anything so much. So yes, I often think about what would have been different if I'd made different choices.
That's cool. Do you since you've traveled so much and you probably encounter strangers all the time, do you have any advice for people to connect with strangers or being open to it and not being too anxious?
I mean, I would say traveling in a weird way is kind of a bit of a cheat code. In a lot of places, in a lot of situations, people want to talk to me. People will come up to me and say, "Hey, are you're traveling by bike? Where are you going? Where'd you come from? Like, what's on this bike? What are you doing?" So traveling in a unique way definitely helps a lot. And certainly there are certain people who have this kind of adventurous spirit. And not just like young people. I've met a ton of I've been at campsites where I've just had some, lady in her 60s or 70s in a camper van shop and say, "Oh wow, like you cycle around the world," and she clearly has that kind of spark of, when she was younger, she had was hiking, biking, etc. So you kind of draw in people who kind of see what you're doing and kind of appreciate the insanity of it, the adventurous spirit of it, you could say. So that for sure is probably the easiest way.
Well, without the cheat code, would you still have no problem talking to strangers, or would it be a little bit harder for you?
I definitely think it'll be a little bit harder. I definitely think so. I think you need that shared communal spirit. Without the bike, I guess, You know, if I'm in an area where there's a lot of people hiking and I'm hiking, yeah, for sure, I connect with them. I will say I climb a lot. I do a lot of bouldering, some lead. I have stopped and had long conversations with every single group of climbers I've met on this trip so far. I'll just be going down a random gravel road and see some people at a crag and just stop and say hello, and immediately we kind of have this shared language and we can start chatting. I talk to them, you know, what kind of climbing they're doing, you know, how it's going.
So maybe developing your own interests can actually lead you to meeting other people.
Yeah, and you got to put yourself in that, you know, in that environment. If you're in an area, you know, if you're in New Zealand, you know, and you like hiking, you're going to meet a lot of people who love hiking. It's going to be super easy to connect with them and kind of, you know.
Cool. The final question I always finish with is, what is one personality trait that you are most proud of having?
Oh, that's a tricky one. I think it's probably being very even-keeled. You know, even when things are tough, I tend to be quite consistent and just mentally have that fortitude to just kind of keep going on.
Is that something you developed as a young child or because of trials and hard times? What?
That's a good question. That's a very good question. I haven't really thought about where it came from. I can't even say it's always been there, but it's something that people see in me a lot. Certainly my partner appreciates in me that when, you know, things are very rough, I'm always there being able to be supportive because I'm so consistent, able to just kind of keep things calm. So I guess that's when I first appreciated that it is something.
Does it rub off on your partner, or you're kind of?
No, definitely not.
No.
No, that doesn't rub off on anyone.
Okay.
But yeah, they certainly see it in me.
Okay.
Yeah. How did I develop it? Who knows? That's a very good question. I mean, it's genuinely a good question. I'd really have to kind of rummage in, you know, the memory cupboard.
I mean, do you think personality traits are mostly just hard set, like they're kind of cemented in, and as you get older, you can't really change them too much? Can we develop?
I'm not qualified to answer that question.
Fair enough. We're good.
I don't feel like my personality has changed dramatically
Yeah.
over the years. So, you know, but you know, we're all growing. I mean, I think we definitely grow, and we definitely have the opportunity, you know, the ability to, you know, think about who we are, how we are, and, you know, make changes for the better.
I mean, you have tons of time on your bike to make any reflections and changes that
all the time I spend on my bike is listening to audiobooks. It's all I do. I've in this trip I've listened to I'm 5 books so far.
So you're constantly charging your headphones, I guess.
I'm constantly charging everything.
No, I actually had to get my cigarette lighter repaired because I overcharged. I searched the wiring. But.
Fair enough.
Anyways,